Anyone who wants to hire her into shared services for driving efficiency, I think she'd do a good job. That's if you're looking for it.
Thank you, sir.
You may be wondering, saying, what's a pharma guy trying to tell us about tech? That too from HR, but peel a little bit of the layer and you'll find that my last few years have been in tech consulting, and primarily I worked through the tech, starting from about 2003 and 4, shared services and so on. So set up about 3 of them, and behind that, now I've also worked with some of the new age startups and and as well as some of the other tech firms. So that's what I'm here to share in some form. One view that I wanted to take was to see whether now should I talk through from an HR lens, should I talk through from technologies that exist in some ways, and there are just so many technologies that are available at this point in time. Let's see, I mean, the next couple of slides, how it lands and what we do through this. Through my consulting experiences, some of the mistakes that I kind of kept seeing companies do again and again in some form is, one is that again some of the statements that were there in the previous conversation, and then some of the things that you keep hearing. We often try to start by saying that there is a tech trend or a technology in some form, and you're trying to see how to fit it in many ways. And I've never seen companies kind of start with a conversation, and the previous panel used this term called as used cases, and we don't glorify that in some form. Many companies I have found, whenever I used to speak to them, struggle to tell you to say what are the problems you are solving in 2023 or 24 or 25, because if they said that, then it becomes a lot more easier to try and find technologies, or it becomes a lot more easier to wire a few more things that are there. The second big thing, I guess, as a mistake many folks make is we try to assume that the technology will solve all the problems, and people spoke about adoption in some form. The mistake again we make is to try and ask a question to the user groups to say, do you like this technology? Yes, I like it. Do you find it easy to use, right? And yes, it is, right? But the question that is rarely asked is to ask to say, saying that, will you use it, or will it make value to the current role that you do? Something that I've never found in many forms. The second big thing that is as a mistake is in terms of rarely do you find companies that I've at least gone through, and I've been through many Fortune 500s or governments and so on. They don't necessarily present you with their roadmap to say, this is how we are thinking through how we will shape our technology. I'm only here to sell one platform, right? At the end of the day, a vendor is only here to sell one platform, and but the company needs to have a view to say, what is my system of record in some form for the next 3 years? What are the layers of interactions that I will have over a period of time? And what are the layers of experience and analytics that I'd have over time? If you sort these 3 pieces in thinking, and then there are many ways to skin this, and every consultant will have their own kind of term around it, but I've tried to keep it simple to say that as a view, you need to have these 3 layers very clear to say, where is it that you're going to answer over the next 3 years. The third is in terms of, now people spoke about machines. It's here, right? I mean, I think people will adapt to it. Right from the last 100 years, when the first wheel was invented and the first engine was invented, people always resisted it, right? That's very human tendency, and at least in this room, let's acknowledge that part of it. But the key aspect that is there, which I haven't found HR teams do this well, is to try and design to say, what is my strategy for human and what is my strategy for machine? Because if HR is trying to do something called as they're trying to manage work in some form, it is a given today to saying that what earlier used to be called as human capital strategy is now a combination of man and machine, or person and machine in some ways. So the concept of job design kind of comes in to saying that how will work happen 2-3 years from now? We believe that this work is going to be done by machine in some form. The last is I think we use the word digital very loosely, right? To saying that we have to teach digital skills to people. I think we somewhere kind of mean to say saying that we want to teach people computer skills in some ways, right? I mean, at the end of it, I think it's not so snazzy to say we want to teach people computer skills in some form. So we kind of have used this loosely. Why I say digital skills is that digital is a bit of a mindset in some form. A person who's digital in mindset will know how to kind of look at various disparate forms of data, know how to kind of use technology and try to throw out certain insights. It comes intuitively as a mindset, right? And that's not something that we find often. Things where I think where it fails, certain technologies fail for companies are also where they don't understand to say saying that you're going to democratize a lot of data. We are very used to having to say saying that BI is only used, most companies will do this. BI is used for the C-suite, which means that they can only see data which is of a certain layer and so on. The person who's actually doing the task is the person who needs the data. The concept of digital is to invert the pyramid in some form, which means that you will provide the insight, right place, right time and so on to that person at the bottom of the pyramid and not at the top of the pyramid, right? And that itself is a fundamental word that is called as just democratizing the data in some ways. Are you ready culturally to do this? When I used to sell a particular platform a few years back, many people would say, we are this, we are that, and so on and so forth. And then finally, when it came to saying that, listen, you're actually, your shop floor guy will see this data faster than your CXO will see this. They're like, no, I can't do this kind of a thing, right? So culturally, people are not used to it. And that's the first mistake they make where they start wiring the tool in an opposite fashion, right? Saying that it first has to go as a notification to the CXO and so on and so forth. A few other things that are there. We are very used to hierarchy in a non-digital setup, right? Which means the supervisor will tell you which training you have to go to. A supervisor will tell you who has to get promoted. You don't need it, right? Today there are tools available. In 2020 or 2019, there were tools available which data science can tell you what training you need to do, what skills are relevant for you, who can be promoted, who's going to be successful in hiring, everything that is there. Right, but just culturally we are not ready for it in many organizations. My view that is there is that before you jump onto any of that, sort some of these first, right? These are the hard questions to ask in the organization, saying, are you ready to make those structural changes? Saying that tomorrow, Mr. Supervisor, we are not going to ask you what training it is. I'm not going to ask you who should get promoted, right? The machine is going to tell me this and I'm going to get it validated from you, right? It's a bit of a change in power structure and so on and so forth. That's the big thing that digital does, which it changes power structures in some form. We, I think, use it easier in the consumer side of the world to say, oh, now we've all become reporters, we all have the same power, we all can tweet. But the minute you go to an organization, the power structures automatically kind of come in play, especially in the non-digital part of it. What's table stakes, at least in the talent side of it today, right? This is available today. Right? It's probably even available 12 months back. And if you are even thinking about this, you're probably adopting something which is a 2020, 21 kind of a technology in some form. Right? And in recruitment, I mean, auto recruit is just table stakes, right? It's just something that does things that flows automatically, flows into video recruiting, flows into chat bots, are all things that happened 2 years back. Things that are market led. Today you don't need to match skills which are in, now these were again 2017, 18, there were tools available which kind of actually told you saying that for your job, what are relevant skills in the market, what are not relevant skills in the market, what's premium skill in the market. So if you have a list of 10 competencies, 15, 20, whatever list that is there, it is available like a click of a button that certain tools are available on this. So from there, auto selection to mentor, auto selection to training, training recommendations and so on, pretty much what is currently happening at scale, right? The third that is there are many, again, tools available, especially if you're operating in Western environments, even more so, where you have to kind of report on diversity, bias for action, and many other such ways. The one other big mistake we make when we wire tools digitally, right, and which is why the startups get it a lot right, is we wire it again on the basis of structure and hierarchy, and that's not how work happens in an organization, right? So there is some work that it's still very nascent. I wish it was a little more adopted, called as org lens or organization lenses or network based organizations as it was called. What it means is that today you have again tools available which tells you saying that for a work to happen in some form, who is asking who, right? They are not asking on the basis of hierarchy, but they are actually going and asking somebody else. Who's influencing? Who's actually the person giving you more information? Who's the person who's probably asking the most pieces of information? This kind of analysis on how your organization is working does not happen in the classic pyramid hierarchies. It's happening in a zigzag fashion. You get lists of people to say these are influencers, these are people who are information givers, these are people who are a lot more seekers, and so on and so forth. That's probably the way to wire some of these tools. Predictive and prescriptive, in my view, I mean, I would probably disagree with the panel in the past to say saying that BI was a 2016 invention, right? Today, technology is about things that come to you. Look at your own consumer experiences. Everything comes to you, right? What you should eat, what you should buy, whose birthday it is, what you should see, everything comes to you on the consumer side. Yet if you go into an organization, nothing comes to you, right? So organizations which are there, and again Gartner kind of put this in 2020 as a trend, primarily to say saying that prescriptive analytics are what was the trend in 20. So you're 2 years down the line, many organizations have already adopted it. What prescriptive is primarily to say saying it will tell you what the problem is, it will tell you why the problem got created, it will give you some options to say saying that how to solve the problem, right? You are doing this even today. You have a meeting, you connect it to Google Maps, and you connect your calendar to Google Maps. It tells you saying that Mr. Naveen, you have to leave at 11:24 to be at this meeting on this. Try and take this route rather than taking this route, because then you will reach, right? That's prescriptive analytics already. You have it already in your ecosystem to some extent. So think about it in terms of saying that as you kind of go through your own talent landscape and what you want to do, these should be table stakes, as I call it, rather than these are not innovative anymore, right? It's not competitive advantage in some form. I'll probably spend a little more time on this one, which is to say your success is not going to come in choosing the best tool available, right? In my view, I think the HR landscape or the talent landscape or whatever you want to call it is extremely crowded, extremely crowded. Right? Everybody uses loosely, and I'm sorry, CFAL in some form, but everybody uses AI, ML and other things. I don't think we have enough of it yet, because for you to run an ML, you have to have data like Facebook and LinkedIn and others, right? You have to first also invest in training a machine for about 18 months. If somebody has done this in this organization, I mean, if they've done 10, 15, 20 people in this room, great for you. But it's not something that's available as a plug and play in many ways, right? You have to have metadata in many ways that's there. The first thing that is, I mean, I spoke about the first part of it, which is a lot of the ways in which we have structured organizations, and shared services are even more, because you have process, you have controls, and you have layers and layers of people trying to do this. And you probably have the classic job architecture. What is DOA's delegation of authority? This one can approve, that one can approve. It's a very control centric environment. And you're talking about digital, which is exactly the reverse of structure in some ways. It does not mean lack of control in some form, but it is not hierarchical in many ways that you're kind of going to do. HR platforms. HR platforms have largely moved to lot of micro-centric experiences that are there. There are plenty of platforms that gives you awesome kind of micro experiences. The problem that is there is that behind those layers, I don't know whether you're still ready for the interaction layer and the records layer that is there, right? So I think we get too enamored with people who will kind of come and show you certain tools and now works well on a mobile, and everybody is mobile native at this point in time. So think about it in terms of saying that what will enhance the productivity of the employee. I mean, all of you are in the business of productivity, and I think it's important, which is where I come back to this story to say saying, do you know what your productivity challenge or use case is going to be for 23 or 24, right? I find it, at least as a consultant, saying people in your roles and positions struggle to articulate it, right? And when you struggle to articulate it, the tech companies are just selling you a tool, right? And then you're trying to fit in the tool, and then you're trying to figure out to say why people are not using it, or why people are not adopting it in the same way like they do for Facebook or wherever it is. I said this, which is to say that it is super crowded, the talent management space. Anything that you want to look for a recruiting tool, there are probably some 50 options, right? There is no market that is there if you look at it, whichever market you look at it, right? Right from the steel to colas to whoever it is, everybody is dominated by 2 or 3. Food services today dominated by 2 or 3. Telecom, 2 or 3 people. I think we are the only place which is there, which is the tech space, especially in the talent space. They're probably like 10, 15, and all are pretty decent, right? The place where I think the struggle is that we have not solved the rest of the things, which is the first set of things to kind of do. The design focus is something that is a critical one. I haven't seen companies do this, which is to say, everybody is used to the Netflix kind of an environment, right? Which is, you know, the way you choose kind of determines the next set of choices that you make. It's very interesting saying that we've never thought about it from an employee perspective to saying, why is it that the way the person chooses a career, the way I choose and benefits, the way I choose certain things, does not determine the next set of choices that it comes through. I haven't found a single company kind of think this through, where we think on consumer journeys, we don't think on employee journeys in some form, or experience maps that are there. And these are again things outside of digital in some form, or the outside of the tool per se, but this is part of the digital thinking, which is the reason why I say that it's a mindset rather than any of these things, right? So for example, I mean, if I chose, let's assume to saying that if I chose to double my insurance for my father this year, and I chose to double the cancer, this thing that is there for him this year, right? How is it that the system never picks it, right? You just type on Google to saying that insurance for father and 75-year-old and cancer, you'll be flooded with nudges and so on and so forth, right? But so companies don't seem to know this in some form, or they don't wire their experiences in some form. 2 other last parts that are there, which is, I don't know how much listening is good listening. We don't listen enough in terms of, I mean, I think your consumer tools listen probably 100x more than what we listen to some of the employee stuff that is there. But I think, I mean, there is still a lot of headroom in terms of how we could listen to employee, what they're doing as chatter, right? Who's the influencers, what are they saying in the social environments, and so on and so forth. But I honestly don't know saying what is invasive. I don't think any company has come to that line to saying, hey, you're being invasive, now we're going to have a rule on it, or we're going to impose something on you in some form, because we've not done it as much. Last part of it is to saying that if your HR team or somebody, or the people function, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't have a single guy on data science, I think you're way behind on the curve, right? So the first step, I think, is to hire somebody called a data science guy in your HR team somewhere who thinks in this fashion, right? And that's where probably your success is going to come to saying that, okay, I know now that it's the starting point. I personally don't believe that the journey starts in IT. I personally believe that all digital journeys start in the user groups, and IT is a bit of an enabler who tries to manage boundaries and guardrails in some form. It's an old format, it's a bit of an ERP thinking format to think saying that IT is going to give you a solution on this. I mean, I did hear somewhere on some of the conversations, so I thought I'd bring it up in some form. I'm going to pause this. I mean, I think most of it that we've spoken as a summary, which is primarily to saying your choices or dilemmas are, do you pick one best in class or do you pick one SaaS? My sense is that the old thinking of integration as a challenge is vanished, right? So the earlier problem that we had of not picking multiple best in class, today it's damn easy to connect people, connect things, right? So I'm kind of a bit of a believer to say, try do a bit of best in class rather than the one box. Your IT guy will force you to take one box, right? So you'll have a bit of an organizational dilemma on this, because otherwise they have to do multiple securities and multiple infosec and multiple data points that they are trying to manage, right? So sometimes you're trying to choose basis what is administratively easy for a certain set of people versus what is the right thing for an employee group in some ways. Platform versus integrated, there are plenty of platforms that are available. People are actually not creating a lot of things. They are just using it like Amazon. I won't name platforms, but actually if you dig in, they'll tell you saying that these are things not even done by them, right? They're not specialists in it, and then just HR platforms that are there. How much does your HR head wants to push the human plus for 2025, saying that these are going to be done by a machine and I'm going to kind of do this. Micro nudges is the part that is there, and the last is that now build your data platform starting from prescriptive, right? Your industry is like the best in terms of saying how nudges will come into a shared services person doing a transaction to say keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this. Tech can do that very easily for you if you kind of look at it, right? So I'm going to pause here. I'm way out of time, but happy to take any questions, one or two, if the kind hostess allows us. Hopefully that sets you up well for the next conversation. You have a bunch of a lot of HR leaders on a fireside chat talking through, I'm assuming, a little bit of the same thing.
I'll just come there next.
Hi Naveen, this is Jyotsna from ANZ. We heard a lot of leaders prior to this speak about attrition as being one of the common challenges, and this is challenges across the industry, just not focused in one particular industry. So what, according to you, do you think the organizations can focus to turn this into a strength?
I'll use my HR hat. I'll pause my tech hat for some time and use my last 25 years of HR hat. I think I've had a philosophy to saying that we focus on a wrong set of a problem that's there, which is let's assume your industry has 25% attrition, right? That's the IT attrition at this point in time and so on. We'd rather never focus on the 75% who choose every day to stay, right? If a person wants to go, my view that is there is they should go. I would never negotiate like a hostage, right? So, but I think we spend enormous amount of organizational energy on saying he's leaving, let's promote, he's leaving, this thing, she's leaving, let's do this, so on and so forth, right? I mean, of course, you could do a few things and like one of the gentlemen said, you will still have 20% attrition. But I think we waste a lot of organization energy on that 5-7% rather than focusing on the 75%. How many of you, for example, do this thing called as, everybody does attrition analysis and why people leave and so on. How many of you do stay interviews, for example, right? Very few do stay interviews. Why are people staying with you? I don't know whether you know adequate insights on that. I think the Pepsi guy said it very well to saying that companies that are very clear to saying we will build rather than buy, very clear, not on a poster but real, are the ones who will win this game in any industry that's there. There's a reason why Hindustan Levers or Reckitt and Coleman and many others, or P&G from the 70s and 80s, who are known for their fabulous talent management, win because they just have built these models over time, right? That's my view.
So I have one more question. This is more on the technology and innovation side. You mentioned about a lot of tools and we're not utilizing it very well, and we need to still learn how to utilize. But what do you think, according to you, is the next innovation disruption that we can see soon in the industry?
I think my favorite is, I wouldn't talk about the tool. I would think saying that the biggest headroom that we have is every company that we walk in, that I walked in as a consultant, believes they don't have enough data and believes that the data is inadequate and not clean, right? We always find that they have enormous amount of data and they have no idea in terms of how to use it, right? So before we jump, I mean, the journey of AI and ML comes when you know what you want with your data and when you know that you can keep it on a loop and trying to make it learn again and again, right? But I've never found a company, a legacy company in some form, which said saying that, no, I think we are okay. I think we know how to solve this in some ways, right? So before you jump onto, I mean, the fancy word that is there, I would say saying that your power of the organization comes with the data that you will use. All this prescriptive analytics and other things is all data that is there, right? Just that is what is going to power you. I mean, there's a reason why a Google or a Facebook is valued a lot more than oil companies today, because just the data, your data that they own. So
you had the same question? Okay.
Brilliant, you guys had same question. So, I'm
there's,
good.
One more hand we see, sir. Shall we take that one and then we'll close?
You're the boss.
Hi Naveen, this is Shazan, and you touched upon a very interesting topic about prescriptive research about the employees, and one of the things which come to my mind is when you look at perspective or looking at something which you have done on the basis of the past data, what we have, how do you think the future of the employee would be in terms of upskill or reskill aspect of it when you look at some of the data which has come from the past, and how do you link both of them together?
I'll peel it a little bit. Sure. I think you're this thing. Prescriptive is not looking at past trends and predicting for you, right? It's also looking at an enormous amount of vast set of data, which is also on the macro side of it. An example in retail, for example, on prescriptive is they will tell you, for example, on a Thursday at 2 o'clock, if it starts raining, for example, there are retail stores which will tell you saying you're going to see a dip in footfall because the weather today is going to be in this fashion. So it's trying to pick data to say your past shopping trends, footfalls in the mall, weather that is happening, a little bit of parking that is happening, so on and so forth. Many pieces of data that is there, and it pushes a notification to a store manager to say you're going to see a huge drop in footfall, or the reverse that is there, vice versa in some form, right? And so prescriptive by itself is not about extrapolating past data. Right, and that's what the machine does, and that's what it does without intuitively understanding it. To your question on skills, there is today available tools. Again, almost 3-4 years back it was available, which is to say my skills that are there today, which I think the company believes what it should be. There's a supervisor layer to it, but outside of this, there is very easily available anywhere between 30 to 50 sources of data that a system can crawl and pull to saying that these are the emerging skills, these are the hot skills, and these are the skills that are there which are redundant. So in your own stack that is there, if in your job, let's say you have 10 things, and you suddenly see on a day saying half of the skills that you are doing are redundant, what would you do? Right? Let's assume you're an employee. What would you do? The first thing that you would do, right? It's an instinct. That's the push. The insight is basically actionable after it. Let's say you're the learning lead, and you find half of your company's list says it is redundant, right? In the marketplace, it's a commodity skill. What would you do? It says you're in many of the emerging ones. Your comp guy sees it, right? And it is an insight to saying that there has to be something that has to be done. That's the prescriptive part that is there, which is it provides you an actionable insight, and it allows you to saying that as a user or as whatever role that you're performing, it forces you to make a decision. It's exactly like how in the consumer side at 11:24 when I get a nudge to say if you don't leave by 11:24 you're going to be late for a 12 o'clock meeting, right? What would I do? Chances are I would leave at 11:24 or before, right? That's the power of the insight. The insight is about trying to ensure there is action taken. It is not just lots of colors of charts, right? That's 2016. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, sir.